Well, how you doing? It's Colin Daniel here from riffninja.com. If you watched my earlier lesson on Nashville tuning, now I'm going to discuss it a little more and talk to you about what to do to get your guitar into a Nashville tuning, because there's some technical issues involved to get a guitar that'll do that. Although the bottom three strings stay the same, it's the top three strings that become an issue. So some of the issues are the gauge of string. Obviously, when we're tuning E, A, and D, those top three strings here, and we're tuning them an octave higher, then we have this issue with we can't use the standard string gauges. There's no way we're going to use the standard string gauges, because it's going to be way too hard on your guitar if even the string will take that kind of attention. So you have to move up to thinner gauge strings, right, to do this. In actuality, Nashville tuning is sort of like only for the 6th, 5th, and 4th string. It's like a 12 string, the high strings on a 12 string, because the high strings on a 12 string are always an octave apart. So you have the low E, and then you tune the string underneath it. Oh, it depends on the 12 string. You have some 12 strings have the string on top is the high string, and the string underneath it is the low string. It depends on who made the guitar, what model you have. I've got both myself. But either way, it's sort of like the top 6th, 5th, and 4th strings on a 12 string, where you have the 6th, 5th, and 4th high strings one octave higher than a standard guitar. And why would we want to do that? Well, to create different tonalities. It works, as I mentioned before, it works really well with another acoustic guitar. You have different options, like in your picking parts. You can hear it when I'm playing it. So you can rethink your guitar a little when you're doing that, which is cool, because that's the thing I love about the guitar the most, is all the different variations. So string gauge is really important. Now when you change string gauge and you change the tension of your guitar, then this thing right here, this neck, what's going to happen is, depending on what kind of strings you had on it before, the strings are going to pull, and that neck's going to start, like right in here, it's going to start doing this, it's going to start to arc. So you're going to need to reset that. And I'll talk to you about string gauges and then how to do that. This is just a cheap guitar that I bought. It was like $100 just for an experiment, and it's actually a nice sounding guitar for a cheap guitar. But it was just an experiment for Nashville tuning, and that's what I suggest you do. Or if you don't know what you're doing with the guitar and you're really not mechanically inclined, then you would have to take it to a technician. And you may get away with just changing the strings on it. Depends on your guitar, and it depends on how fussy you are. I'm extremely fussy. I've got a lot of guitars, and I don't need to have a guitar that plays poorly. This guitar plays as nice as any of my other guitars, just it's set up for Nashville tuning. So I don't have to change anything physical on the guitar other than the strings, and possibly in here, the string nut. That can be an issue, because the grooves were designed and made for a thicker string, and we're going to a string that's, well, pretty much half that gauge, is what we're going to go to, and I'll explain the gauges in a minute to you. So that can be an issue, and that will take a technician to fix that. Sometimes you can fix it just by taking a little, a very, very fine, either hacksaw blade or knife, depending on how thick your strings are, and just cutting a smaller groove in there, so that, but you cut it too far and you'll ruin the nut, and then you'll have to get a whole new string nut to repair it. Try it first without the repair of the nut, and see if you get any buzz or rattle, then that can be a problem. This one wasn't too much of an issue. I just had to make the groove a little, just a very, very little bit, just enough for the string to sit on so it doesn't vibrate, and it worked fine. just a very, very fine, they call it a nut file, and it's a very thin, fine file for the thinner gauge string, and that's what I used in there to just to make the slot small so that, you know, the slot looks like this, like a V, right? And the string, whatever the thickness of the string is, it sits in the V wherever it needs to, and it doesn't rattle, because it's going to rattle in the nut if you don't do that. And so now the string gauges, this is what I got on this guitar. I experimented with them a little bit. I took a basic set of 10 gauge strings, 10 gauge acoustic strings. So I started with that, and it's a 22 wound, a 13, and a 10 playing. So a 22 wound, 13 playing. This is for my G, B, and E strings, because you're obviously going to have to break up a set of strings, because they don't make sets of strings. You'll have to buy some individual strings, right, to pull this off. But the G is a wound, bronze wound 22. That's 22 thou, you know, 0.022. That's your G. And the B is a 0.013. And the E is a 0.10 or a 10. So it's 22, 13, and 10, which is fairly standard gauge for a light, an extra light set of acoustic guitar strings, which is what you can go thicker, I mean, but you have to go in relation to the gauge. If you decide you want to go up to an 11, then I say, you know, the E is 11, the B would be a 14 or 15, and the G will be like a 24 wound. But I chose to keep it to a thinner gauge, like lighter gauge strings, because there's a lot of tension on the guitar that you've bumped this up a whole octave, even though you are going to go down and gauge a string. So you have to watch that. So for the top three strings, the E I use 28 wound, and that's in a bronze wound, an 18 plain, and a 14 plain. Now you could turn that around and you could bump it up just a little more, like go through a 30 wound and then go to a 20 wound for the A. I chose not to. I wanted thinner string, you know. There's a little flexibility in that. I wouldn't go too much higher than that. Like I said, I'm on this guitar, I've got a 28 wound for the E, an 18 plain for the A, and a 14 plain for the D. But I'm using, you could use a 30 wound here. That's a 0.030, 30 wound, and a 0.018, or instead of a 0.018, which I've got, you could use the 0.020, and you could choose either a plain or a wound for that, because they do make a wound. As a matter of fact, they do make a wound down to an 18 if you can get them. They're a little more rare. But a 20 is fairly easy to come by in a wound. And then the 14 would be, what I've got for a 14 would be like a 16, you know, and it'd probably be a plain. I wouldn't want to use another wound on there. Like I said, about the only other issue you have is the nut groove. And then, of course, readjusting your truss rod. On this guitar, the truss rod adjustment is underneath here. It's in the sound hole. If you can see, it's in there. And it's an Allen key. And I wouldn't attempt to adjust that unless you know what you're doing. But you're going to have to check your neck for arc this way. Like if you want to sight down your neck, what you do is you use the string as your straight edge. And you look down your string. And you look down the edge of your neck and you sight the neck that way to see how much of a curve it has. Too much of a curve and your action will be too high, and it'll be hard to keep the guitar in tune. And that's why I mentioned that if you're not that mechanical, or you can make a mistake and ruin the guitar, is what I'm saying, right? If you're careful and you're patient, there's lots of more information available to doing setups on your guitar, and you can Stu Mac is a real good place. Stu McDonald, excellent place to learn about guitar setups if you're interested to find out more about that. Yeah, StuMac.com, awesome place. Buy parts, and I get the newsletter every month on the repairs too, because there's always something to learn. And if you don't feel comfortable with any of that, then you got to go to a technician at a reputable dealer somewhere where a guy can do your repair for you or change your guitar over, I'd suggest you start with a cheaper guitar and see if you like it. Because once you've made the change, the guitar may not change back very easily to a standard tuning without, again, maybe replacing the nut and readjusting things. Depends on the guitar. Anyways, in the end, you get this beautiful ringy, jingly, jangly guitar sound that I really love. And you have all these different options. You know, and I like the softness of it too, because you don't have those low bass notes anymore. You've got higher strings to work with, so you can get more arpeggiated on the high strings. Yeah, it's great fun, and it's like playing a new instrument too. All right, I hope that I've informed you and given you some insight into a very interesting tuning that's used quite a bit. Have fun, boys and girls, and don't forget to subscribe. And if you're really serious about playing the guitar, check out my site, riffninja.com. All right.